Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I take a look at the last 5 new to me board games that I've played and I review and rank them. Now this particular video has been a long time coming because I had played the first 2 games on the list a long time ago, but I hadn't played many new games since then, so I've only just completed the 5, so apologies for the delay. Now before I get started on the 5 games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer, and if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so let's start with number 5, and number 5 is Conquest, which is an upcoming crowdfunding project. I can't quite recall if it's on Kickstarter or GameFound, but I'll clarify that below. This is a kind of skirmish style game as you have several planets, I think on a 3x3 grid. At the start of the game you are going to be choosing 3 characters of kind of subtypes, and you're going to be moving around this grid of planets trying to conquer them based on different goals and objectives, to control them, and obviously fight with your opponents to try and eliminate them. You are scoring points in different ways, so you get points based on doing a certain amount of damage, or of course, eliminating your opponents. Every single planet has a different way of gaining their favour as well, so every time you say conquer a planet you'll get X amount of points, and this could be things such as buying a certain amount of equipment cards on that turn and things like this. So the way the planets work are very different, and you want to kind of do the right thing at the right place. Now visually this game looks gorgeous, especially the planet tiles. They look so like hyper realistic, just a wonderful artwork, and the characters themselves are really colourful, bright, vibrant. They look very cool, some more than others, but generally speaking the artwork is pretty top notch. The gameplay, I think this is a bit more of a mismatch in tastes, because this is a roll to resolve style game. Yes, there are tons of mitigation tools, but generally speaking you are just rolling a bunch of dice. If you're the attacking player, I think you get 1 more die than your opponent does, and you're trying to roll sword symbols, and the defending player is trying to roll the shield symbols, all the stuff we've seen before. Every character has their own strengths and weaknesses, unique powers. They can even upgrade to a better version of themselves to get even better powers. You could buy equipment cards, one-off cards, these style of things, but these styles of games generally don't work for me. You guys know by now that I'm a pretty mechanically driven player. I like Euro games. I don't care how dry they are, how rich the theme is. It's all about the mechanisms and how clever those mechanisms are. This is pretty much turn your brain off, roll some dice, and see how it works out. I did feel that the combat in this game wasn't quite consequential enough, and to be clear, I did have an earlier copy of the game. I think it's close to finished, but the version I have doesn't have all the game modes and kind of variants that you can choose to play in the final version. So there were some rules ambiguities in the version I had, because I don't think the rulebook was complete, which certainly, to be transparent, it could have influenced my overall enjoyment of the game. But I think whether it's tweaked even 50%, it's not going to be a game for me, because I don't like that core mechanism of just rolling dice to try and hurt your opponents. So one that I can certainly see a lot of people enjoying. If you are the more American style gamer, you like those skirmish style games, rolling a bunch of dice, special player abilities, gotcha moments, and take that moments with these cards, then you're probably going to like this one, especially because it does look so gorgeous, but it's not quite right for my collection or my taste. So personally I wouldn't recommend it, but you could take that information as, if you do like the opposite style of games for me, you probably will like it. So that is Conquest at number 5. At number 4, I have another upcoming crowdfunding project. This is Dungeons of the Oak Dell. Now this is a draft and write style game, as you are rolling a bunch of dice of 2 different colours, and then you are drafting those dice to do things on your player sheet. So the dice have 2 main kind of actions, so the first of which being your movement, as you're going to move around this dungeon in a bird's eye view, trying to avoid traps, unlock treasure chests, fight bad guys, all this kind of stuff you would expect with a dungeon crawling game. There are different missions as well, so you can play different scenarios. But the second use for the dice is probably the most interesting part of this entire game, which is the dice is going to show you which of these spots on these enemy sheets that you can cross off, and you're going to draw a line from this particular colour to another colour on this wheel. Therefore you're going to have straight lines crossing through your enemies. And then the way you actually deal damage to your opponents is that whenever you, say, do another attack and you cross an already existing line on that enemy, and that kind of intersection where the two lines cross each other, if that's over the actual enemy itself, then you're going to inflict a wound on that character. The enemies work in different ways. So for example, I think one of them was, the more damage you do to their wings, the more they hit you back, this kind of thing. So I thought it was a very novel and creative combat mechanism. I think even for uniqueness alone and creativity alone, it deserves, some credit for that. The dungeon crawling stuff is, is pretty standard. You do have different objectives, one of which is to visit certain locations before a certain time runs out, this kind of stuff. And of course, with the dungeon crawler, you have the potential to kind of buy new items and increase your stats as you go on to make you more resilient, or to use these potions to boost you, even to get better equipment to make you kind of avoid traps and stuff. So yeah, there's lots of, there's basically all the hallmarks of a dungeon crawler that you would like. Scales very well. It is mostly a multiplayer solitaire. But that means that you can play it on your own and still have the full experience. So this is actually a game I would play solo mode, because it's rapid, quick, and you can just focus on what you're doing. Very simple kind of mechanism when you play solo, where when you draft your die that you want, I think the next strongest die on the board is taken away. And I didn't mention as well, like sometimes you're not always incentivized to take the most powerful dice, because if you do, I think it means the enemies hit you a little bit harder. So you do have to strike that perfect balance of when to move, because you do have to move the exact amount, when to hold back, when to go get the treasure, when to do all this different stuff. And again, all the time you are fighting against the clock. So I think there's going to be different versions of this available. I know there's going to be a print and play version, which would be straight up brilliant for this style of game. I believe it's going to be a very affordable price as well. And I think they are also doing physical copies, so you can kind of choose which you want. But again, if you like simple dice drafting, roll and write style games that isn't roll and write, it's a draft and write, good dungeon crawling, fancy mechanisms, and even like the art style is somewhat charming, because it has this kind of crude, naive style where it's all like hand drawn, but it somehow works for the game, which I think is quite nice. So enjoyed it. It's probably not a game I'm always going to go back to, because I tend to like maybe more abstracted roll and write style games. But this one I certainly wouldn't turn down, because it plays quick. You can invest in your character. You can approach the game in different ways, and it's fun. So that is the Dungeons of the Oak Dell at number 4. At number 3, I have another upcoming game, and this is from the designer of the great Arboretum. So Arboretum, one of the greatest card games out there, a ferocious hand management game. This is by Dan Cassar, who is the same designer of that game, and there is some crossover between the original Arboretum and this one. You can certainly see that it's inspired by it, but it's definitely different enough to warrant playing both and putting them in different categories. But Mischief is a game more about trying to manipulate the board state and swing influences, because you have several different of these tables consisting of these fantasy characters, and each one of these tables has a bunch of cards assigned to it, either on the dark side or the light side. And then what you're doing is you're very carefully and brain-rackingly managing this hand of cards to play this kind of tug-of-war system to see who's going to influence that particular table. There are different tricks you can do in terms of, if you play the same number as a card that's on the opposite side, then you can kick that card out of the game and therefore kind of put a lot more strength into the other team. And if you do that, you're going to get these particular tokens, but if another person does it, then they can steal that token from you. The same applies to these protection mechanism where if you place sequences of numbers, so if, say, the 2 was on the board, and then I played the 1 card, it would mean that the 2 card is now protected from being kicked off by the other players, and again, you would get a token from doing that. And there's always this back and forth between grabbing these tokens from each other, and of course you want to be in control of these tokens, which are worth points, when it comes to the end of the game. Now, the biggest kind of twist on this one is that much like Arboretum, the cards you have in your hand at the end are ultra important, because if, say, you had, I don't know, the Goblin card in your hand, you are going to reveal that at the end of the game and add the value to the influence of the Goblin table. So you can swing that influence at the last second without your opponents knowing, but of course they might be doing the same thing, they might be doing the opposite team. And if the influence shifted from one team to the other, and you had a higher value card, so you were kind of most responsible for doing that, then you get a hell of a lot of points. But if the team stayed in charge, like you're playing a bit more of a safer bet, then you can, and you had the lower card, then you are going to gain points that way, but not quite as many, but still a healthy amount of points. So it's this kind of commodity speculation, kind of wagering, bit of like a tug of war thing going on. So lots of interconnected mechanisms. I would say this is a gamer's game. I don't think you're gonna introduce this to someone who's new to card games, and they're not going to jump straight in and understand it. I think there's a few grinding gears, but once you get your head around it, it does actually flow quite nicely, and the decisions do come thick and fast, because you only ever have 13 cards in your hand, and I think you only play 8 of those, so you only get 8 turns each to manipulate the board state to how you like it. So lots of card changing, lots of I'm keeping hold of this, but I'm playing this, I'm betting on this, and so on. So again, decision making is strong in this game. Artwork is very charming. It has this kind of fantasy theme, and with a design pedigree, you know, I can't criticize anything mechanically with this game, because, you know, the designer is so good at what he does. And yeah, all in all, I'm quite looking forward to seeing how this one does. And it's a strong design, that's for sure. So that is Mischief at number 3. Okay, so let's get into the top 2 now. And at number 2, I have LYNGK. So yeah, this is still remaining from the JIF series, the JIF project that I've been going through. A bit of a lingerer on from those other review videos, but these were the 2 that I played a long time ago that hadn't featured on a review video yet. LYNGK is a brilliant little abstract game, as you are trying to collect stacks of different colours, or, you know, each stack consists of I believe 5 different colours. You are going to be moving these pieces on the board, gobbling up other pieces, but you don't actually control any colour at the beginning of the game. So you actually claim the colours as your own as the game progresses. And then if your kind of piece of your colour is on the top of those stacks, then you're going to have control of them. So you want to be kind of gobbling up your opponent's pieces, but keeping your pieces on top. It has this cool linking mechanism, where if you control a certain colour, then you can use other colours of that type, or other pieces of that colour as a pivot point to divert around the board and use it as a kind of junction. I thought that was really cool, and you can string some cool moves together, especially later in the game. The board quickly dries up, so you have to act with a sense of urgency, and I love that kind of pivot point of when do you claim these pieces. You know, do you keep your options open until quite late in the game, but bearing in mind that, you know, you have weaker abilities if you're doing that, because you can't use the junction mechanism or the link mechanism? Or do you want to claim a piece early and go all in, and again try to utilize that link mechanism as much as you can? Again, I like all these games from this series. This one's one of the best ones in my opinion. I think this came 3rd on my ranking video when it came to ranking all the games. Again, you guys are probably a bit exhausted of me talking about these these JIF games, but this is the end of them, apart from the next one, which is number 1. And number 1, I have YINSH. So again, another one from the JIF project. This one is probably more widely known as the favourite of the series, and I can certainly see why. It's probably my 2nd favourite, which it came in that position on my ranking video. This one is a game where you are moving these rings around this big kind of matrix. And if you go over these other pieces, you're going to flip them from one side to the next. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to, if you're the white player, you're trying to get 5 white pieces in a row. And if you do, you're going to score a point basically. But when you score a point, you are going to remove a ring from the board. And that means of course, you're one step closer towards winning, but your board presence is slightly weaker. So a wonderful catch-up mechanism. And I did mention in that ranking video that that's probably my favourite catch-up mechanism of all time, because it's so subtle but so well done. And lots of little micro decisions you can make here by putting rings in certain locations to block your opponent from taking certain moves. And definitely the meta of this game is going to build up if you play it more and more with the same person. Wonderfully smooth, and yeah, I can't really fault a single thing about this game. Of course, there's no theme or anything like that. It's just a pure head-to-head, 2-player abstract strategy game. But in that particular genre, this is pretty much as good as it gets, in my opinion. So that is YINSH at number 1. And again, if you want to know more about the JIT project, then do check out a recently uploaded video where I rank the entire series of 7 games. So there we have it, that concludes the video. Hopefully you have enjoyed this and it's put some games on your radar. If you have enjoyed it, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my other content too. Additionally, keep an eye out for my own game released, THALAMUS, which will be, hopefully having physical copies very, very soon. And send me an email if you would like a copy, and I'll make sure to put one back for you. But that's it really. So if you have enjoyed the video, again, thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.